Right, so, born Jonathan Crane, he was the meek but intelligent child of a normal Gotham family. Unfortunately, he suffered years of bullying, which caused him to be in a constant state of terror. Deciding to overcome his phobias, Jonathan dedicated his life to studying fear. Jonathan became a professor of psychology and psychiatry to overcome his fears of being teased by his classmates, this obsession with his studies. Eventually, he decided to get a job at Blackgate prison to research fear and nightmares. Crane then made a gas that induced fear in his patients, believing that criminals were the perfect subject for his tests as they were effectively the embodiment of his childhood bullies. Crane ran tests on the prisoners at the prison to improve his toxin. Eventually, Crane was found out and fired. Seeking revenge, he adopted the identity of the supervillain Scarecrow to get back at his former employees via his fear gas. This brought Crane into conflict with Gotham's protector, Batman. To Crane's amazement, Batman wasn't visually affected by his fear gas and subjected to a dose of his own medicine before being arrested. Once recovered, Crane became intrigued with the idea of a man who had no fears, deciding to focus on breaking the Batman along with the rest of Gotham. To this end, Crane researched relentlessly to create a batter of fear gas that could break the Dark Knight. Over the years, Crane repeatedly broke out of Arkham Asylum, hoping with each chance to infect the citizens of Gotham with his fear gas to study their fears. As an added bonus, this would lure in Batman so Crane could douse him with his fear gas. However, he was repeatedly bested by Batman and subjected to his fear gas again and again over the years. This had an unintended side effect on his self-preservation cortex. Crane was gradually beginning to lose his own sense of fear, increasing the instability of his mind. However, due to Batman being what he saw when he was infected by his fear gas, Crane retained a fear of bats no matter how much his own immunity to the toxin increased. The last known time Scarecrow attacked Gotham was when he took over a school and pumped the place full of his fear toxin. Even though Scarecrow was returned to Arkham, he continued his plans from a secret loft that was hidden at the intensive treatment center. This plotted his next move with some stolen blueprints of the asylum. In secret, Scarecrow managed to hide 3 canisters worth of his fear toxin in Arkham West. Unknown to him, the Riddler would discover the cache and make it one of his riddles for Batman. Scarecrow was later incarcerated at Arkham Asylum as the Suicide Squad arrived. Crane managed to escape when the Joker let everyone out of their cells, allowing Crane to infect officers with fear toxin and escape, though he was eventually recaptured. While incarcerated, Crane was assigned to Dr. Murphy for treatment, but was later sent to Dr. Combs. Managing to sneak in some of his fear gas, Crane broke Combs. As Combs saw horrifying visions of the deaths of his family, security arrived and captured Crane, who noted that it was impossible to continue his research with the Arkham staff impeding him at every step. 3 weeks later, Crane was referred to Dr. Stephen Kellerman. Despite Kellerman's attempts to treat him, Crane acted as though he were conducting the sessions, even dictating notes, and was simply patronizing him. Crane toyed with Kellerman during each session, shared his philosophy on fear as the driving force behind the human condition, and even used everyday examples from the therapist's supposedly fulfilling life as evidence. These meetings rattled Kellerman, who came to believe that Crane was simply sadistic rather than insane. There's not much of a difference, actually. Crane's mind games were actually having even more of an effect on Kellerman due to the fear toxin chemicals he had incorporated into his cologne, and was also exposed to the guards who brought him to each session. This was part of a plan to further Scarecrow's research, who rigged the medical facility's air conditioning system to flood the building with the rest of his latest fear toxin formula. Everyone exposed to both compounds began to hallucinate their worst nightmares. Before Crane could continue, Batman crashed into the room. Kellerman had realised what his patient was up to and provided the Dark Knight with a sample of the toxin to create an antidote, which he gave to Arkham Asylum guard Aaron Cash to disperse through the rigged air conditioning system. Scarecrow was amazed that Batman seemed to be unaffected by the gas, then gleeful when he implied that he was being affected as much as anyone else. Despite his pleas to learn what kind of vision his nemesis had seen, Crane was defeated, arrested, and returned to his cell, and lost once again to the Dark Knight's willpower. Scarecrow was one of the Arkham inmates on Joker's party list, who was released during the Clown Prince of Crime's takeover of Arkham Island, both to distract Batman and for the Joker's general amusement, as Crane's experiments often left his victims dead of heart attacks. Crane made use of his secret stash of fear toxin, intending to break Batman this time. It's suggested by a fake patient session the Joker had with Batman that Crane had been studying Batman with him. Both were confused as to why Batman hadn't snapped and come over to their side yet. Batman tracked a kidnapped Commissioner James Gordon to the island's medical facility. While Batman saved the staff, Joker mentions Crane as one of 2 old friends coming to the party. One will be absolutely terrified if you leave without saying hello. He rescued the staff. Batman took out a raiding party of henchmen before he took the elevator to the lower levels to follow Gordon's forensic trail of tobacco. The Joker taunted Batman through the asylum's CCTV system and considered to just release the elevator from its cables as a joke. As Batman made his way into the basement levels, he began coughing on a colourless gas being remotely pumped into the elevator. Prepare to face your fears. All of them. Scarecrow had already gone to work with torturing new victims for research data, having injected them with his fear toxin. He watched as they all died of heart attacks before fleeing into another part of the building. Noting that the good doctor had started work early, Joker laughed that Batman would be buzzed through for his appointment when Scarecrow was ready, going on to ask what the Dark Knight feared most. Batman used the vents to bypass the doors, finding Commissioner Gordon calling for help through one of the grates. Moments later, Batman emerged from the vents to find the corpse of his dear friend, his mind reeling from one of his greatest fears. Batman attempted to hunt Scarecrow down, only to find himself in the morgue, where he was confronted by the animated corpses of his parents and a twisted obstacle course that was overseen by a giant, omnipotent Scarecrow. After he realised that he was experiencing a fear toxin hallucination, Batman overcame the delusion by avoiding the delusional Scarecrow's fiery gaze, used a bat signal as a symbol of his willpower, and shined it directly onto Scarecrow. Batman returned to his senses just in time to discover that Scarecrow was long gone. The most likely explanation is that the fear toxin in Crane's syringes had run out, and he needed to refill them before making another attempt to break Batman. Over the course of the night, Batman uncovered the mystery of the Titan formula and investigated the Arkham Mansion to find either Dr. Penelope Young or to destroy her notes. He managed the latter, but the Joker wasn't outdone yet, and sent Victor Zsasz after Dr. Young. Batman raced off to find her, but was gassed by Scarecrow again. This trapped Batman in a hallucination of the night that his parents were murdered, as his 9-year-old self walked down a seemingly never-ending hall that turned into Crime Alley. He overcame this part of the delusion by remembering the kind words of a younger Gordon, returned to his adult state, used all his skills once again to avoid the Scarecrow's gaze, and illuminated him with the bat signal. Batman managed to free himself a second time, discovering that he had gotten trapped inside the belfry. As the night wore on, Batman learned from Poison Ivy of a plant spore in the asylum's sewer system that would help him concoct an antidote to the Titan formula and return to the intensive treatment center to retrieve it from Killer Croc's lair. As Batman made his way to the elevators, he began coughing on the fear toxin again and experienced a strange kind of vertigo. His vision was filled with static to the distorted sound of Joker's laughter. At this point, Batman began reliving the earlier events of the night, but in Joker's place. The Joker arrived at Arkham in the Batmobile and took Batman to the intensive treatment center. Batman ranted and raved, insisted that he hadn't killed that family, and demanded to be cut free. He resisted Crane's attempts to examine him, who then declared him a lost cause and left him to the Joker's mercy. The Joker leveled his gun at Batman's head and fired it at point-blank range. After he realized that he was suffering yet another fear toxin hallucination, Batman climbed out of his own grave and made his way past the cells that were full of other insane Batmen to find the bat signal. Just like last time, Crane made Batman see him as an omnipotent giant that could kill him with a single palm strike. He even called in henchmen to attack him, but Batman beat them easily. About to break Batman's mind, Crane was shocked when Batman shined the bat signal. With Batman free of the illusion, he grabbed Crane by his hood. However, Scarecrow jabbed his syringes into Batman's gauntlet, giving the Dark Knight more fear toxin to fight off. The illusion now had the giant Scarecrow watching Batman resist numerous attackers, which included 2 henchmen injected with the Titan formula. With Batman occupied with his hallucinations, Scarecrow fled to the adjacent corridor. The bars would keep Batman at bay the next time he broke free. Every time Batman defeated a number of enemies, one of the 3 bat signals would activate and damage Scarecrow. Batman prevailed yet again and defeated as many skeletal warriors as needed to strike Scarecrow with the 3 bat signals. Scarecrow was left shocked by these turn of events, as Batman was once again gripping his head through the bars. He gave Batman another quick jab of toxin, buying himself time to flee to the elevator with a pouch full of his toxin. Crane rode the elevator all the way down to the lowest level to reach the sewers. He didn't know that the sewer system served as the lair of Killer Croc. Joker's henchmen locked the way back up behind him, hoping Crane would get eaten by Croc, as they found him creepy. However, Batman pummeled them and unlocked the path. As Batman examined a Titan-mutated plant, Scarecrow warned him to stay away, or he would drop the bag of fear toxin into the underground river. The cave would fill with all of Batman's worst nightmares. Worse, the Gotham water supply would be contaminated for over 100 years due to its potency. Before Scarecrow could make good on his threat, Killer Croc burst from the water and grabbed Crane, having mistaken him for a guard, a stray inmate, or Batman. Scarecrow lost his grip on the fear toxin, letting it drop harmlessly to the ground. Fearing for his own life, Scarecrow flailed hopelessly to get free of Killer Croc's grip. Right as the monster was about to take a bite out of him, Crane was saved from that gruesome fate by Batman, who managed to toss a batarang at Croc's electric shock collar to activate it. Though the zap from the shock collar stopped Croc from trying to eat Scarecrow, he still refused to let go. Instead, Croc jumped back into the water, dragging the screaming madman with him. To Scarecrow's bad luck, the shock collar zapping was something that angered Croc. In retaliation for making Batman activate the collar, Croc badly mauled Crane's face. Scarecrow was spared any further maiming, ironically thanks to Batman again, as Croc had detected his footsteps on the floating planks deeper in the sewers. He left Crane to die of his injuries as Batman was his main target. Though terribly injured, Scarecrow managed to swim out into the Gotham River, grabbing onto a crate of the Titan formula. Using it to float, he managed to sneak into Gotham and gained access to medical attention. It turned out that having his leg in Killer Croc's grip had broken it, so he needed a leg brace. His face had been severely disfigured as well thanks to Croc, now missing some teeth and his right eye becoming blind, along with chunks of his nose gone as well. Though Crane had no one to blame but himself for being careless enough to venture into Killer Croc's lair, he instead decided to blame Batman for his pain, even though Batman's intervention is what kept him from being killed. Crane decided he needed to show Gotham that their hero was nothing more than a man, by unmasking Batman on live TV and breaking the Dark Knight's will with his fear gas. To this end, Crane managed to find a hideout on Bleak Island, where he set up a lab behind the storeroom of Mr. Chen's toy factory. He also gained control of the top floor of another building, where he built a gassing chamber with a two-way monitor for communications. He also brokered with the Falcone crime family, obtaining a boat next to their shipping yard. The hull's contents included crates Crane specifically requested to be filled with insects with neurotoxins. With these hideouts, and possibly others, Crane remained hidden from the public eye as he continued to experiment to create the ultimate fear toxin to break Batman once and for all. As the months passed by, Crane remained hidden from Gotham, leading most of the GCPD to believe that Croc had killed him. However, Batman persisted in trying to find Crane or some evidence of where his corpse was. When Old Gotham was later converted into the super prison known as Arkham City, Crane saw a good chance to obtain an abundant amount of test subjects for his research as the Industrial District served as Joker's territory. Among the many test subjects was one of the Joker's most devoted followers, Roach. Crane could see the goon was fighting off any visible signs of fear, deciding to explain the details of his latest batch of toxin and his desire to prevent another failure like the one back at the asylum. Crane appeared to have been in contact with both the Identity Thief and the Riddler, as several containers of his fear gas were found in the thief's hideout and in one of the rooms in which Riddler held a challenge for Batman. If true, that would explain how Crane's old mask became one of the riddles that Nigma had prepared for the Dark Knight, unless it was just a copy to remind Batman that he hadn't found Crane yet. Batman also found Crane's hideout, and Roach, who had a panic attack the moment Batman examined him. Crane was nowhere to be found, possibly having found a way to enter and leave Arkham City unknown to everyone else, as no one but Black Mask, who used explosives, had managed to escape the prison. Oracle was also not convinced that Crane was dead, even temporarily thinking that he managed to gas Batman and trick him into becoming the Identity Thief, as the inmates all kept saying Bruce Wayne was responsible. The Joker appeared to know he was alive, as he suggested his fear toxin as being the reason Batman was hallucinating. If true, this would explain the relative ease with which Scarecrow could get a hold of victims to experiment on with his fear toxin, as Joker was a sadist that greatly enjoyed causing others misery. The Clown Prince of Crime cared little for his minions and disposed of them when they weren't useful. Further, it appeared that Crane had his own agents in Arkham City. During Protocol 10, many dead prisoners in orange skeleton/Scarecrow outfits could be found. It's possible they worked for the other villains' crews undercover, just like the Riddlers, or had simply kept out of trouble and gathered information for Crane. Crane later sent 3 hidden radio frequencies on the cryptographic sequencer to Batman. Each was a numeric code which, once translated, read, "I will return, Batman, you will pay for what you have done to me, and fear will tear Gotham to shreds." Following the closing of Arkham City, Scarecrow listened in about the explosion at Arkham, which many mistakenly believed claimed Batman's life, commenting on how stupid the police are, as guns do not scare criminals and even empower the weaker thugs. He continued to play the message over and over, hoping Batman would learn of his impending return. Penguin later employed Mr. Hammer and Sickle to track down Scarecrow, wanting him to join his group to bring order back to Gotham. Possibly leaking information deliberately, Crane managed to lure them into his hideout in Chinatown, where they found a Scarecrow dressed like Batman strung to the ceiling. Sickle made the poor choice of smashing the bottles in Crane's lab, sending both brothers into a hallucination of their father attempting to kill them. Crane tortured them for days, perhaps using their strong wills and bodies to test how lethal his toxin had become. He ended up sewing them back together, a wish the twins had, and stuffing straw into Sickle's mouth. He sent them back to Penguin with a message. Needing better resources for his research, Crane entered a partnership with Simon Stagg. After months of extensive research, Crane ended up creating a strain of fear toxin that could be absorbed through the skin, effectively making gas masks useless, though hazmat suits would be effective. Another project of theirs was the Cloudburst, a device that could spread the fear toxin as a giant cloud, while amplifying its potency. The Nimbus cell powering it would double as an EMP, disabling any electronics not powered by the cell. Secretly, Stagg sought to reverse engineer the fear toxin to cure depression. He was annoyed with Crane's obsession with revenge against Batman, willing to take the formula by force if needed. With 2 years' worth of time spent mostly by himself, Crane's mind began deteriorating at a much greater pace. With his hatred of Batman fueling him, Scarecrow became a near inversion of his former self, a cackling mad scientist dedicated to studying the effects of his research. He had now become more somber, though still dedicated to his study of fear. He had come to believe that fear was the very motivation for everything, even for Batman. Crane planned to cover the entire eastern coast of America in his fear toxin, turning it into his domain. In other words, Scarecrow wanted nothing more than to create complete and utter chaos. If Scarecrow wasn't stopped, eventually the entire world would fall victim to his fear toxin and civilization would collapse. At some point, Crane underwent facial reconstruction surgery. The end result was his face became more hideous than it already was, resembling his iconic mask with threads linking his jaw to what remained of his upper lips, and 2 gas mask tubes attached to his jaw. Many who saw him found it hard to keep their lunches down. Others wondered if he had deliberately taken a knife to his face and cut chunks of it out. Others believed he was simply wearing a mask due to the quality of the surgery. By this time, Scarecrow had established his main base on Arkham Island after Tiger was disbanded following the attempt of Protocol 10. He was found by the Arkham Knight, who sought him out because he was the only foe Batman had faced that could attack him psychologically. Scarecrow agreed to work with the Knight to break Batman and unmask him, though he explained that once Batman was broken, killing him would be an act of mercy. To this end, Scarecrow called the remaining supercriminals together. He met with Riddler privately, appealing to his ego, and coaxed him into launching his own challenge to Batman on Halloween, as multiple threats had stretched the Dark Knight thin. Believing that Poison Ivy could further strengthen his fear toxin, Scarecrow tasked Harley Quinn and Penguin with freeing her from the Bloodhaven Police Department. With Ivy rescued, Scarecrow explained the plan to her, Harley, Two-Face and Penguin. They would force a mass evacuation of Gotham, leading it to their gangs and the Arkham Knight's militia, thus outnumbering Batman and the GCPD. Ivy flatly refused, stating that she wasn't interested in his petty human games. Thus, Scarecrow knocked her out and sent Ivy to the gas chamber in his safe house in Chinatown. This way he could test the toxin on Ivy, while ensuring she couldn't use pheromones to brainwash the militia guarding her. To cover the cost of the militia's equipment, Crane, Harley, Two-Face and Penguin paid a combined $30 million to the Knight. They also hired Deathstroke as a backup commander and advisor to the militia, as he was the toughest foe Batman ever faced. They paid in advance, ensuring the mercenaries' help. The Knight also revealed a crucial piece of information to Scarecrow. Barbara Gordon was one of the Batman's allies. If they kidnapped her, this would break Batman's alliance with her father, leaving the Commissioner more vulnerable and reckless. Scarecrow favoured the idea as it played on fear. On October 30th, Scarecrow and his army initiated their plan. The Knight went to Paulie's diner with a bag of the fear toxin to make a public demonstration of its new potency. The patrons exposed to the gas tore at each other, with Officer Owens being the sole survivor. Scarecrow then publicly broadcast to all of Gotham and explained that horrific scene was caused by just 5 ounces of his fear toxin. He followed up with the threat to detonate bombs that contained the fear toxin around Gotham, which prompted a mass evacuation. Many of the criminals believed that Scarecrow must have a sense of humour, as he chose Halloween for his attack. However, only Batman and the outmatched GCPD were left to face Gotham's most wanted, who were under Scarecrow's protection, as well as the Knight's soldiers and drones. The militia used Founders Island as their main base. Scarecrow spent most of his time here, broadcasting to the monitors in Gotham. Ominously, Crane announced that soon all of Gotham would be receiving a gift from him. He would release his toxin upon the city, allowing those infected with it to become the dark beasts that they truly were inside. Believing they would need reinforcements, Scarecrow reached out to Mr. Freeze. In exchange for helping them, The militia would provide better resources to find a cure for Nora. However, Freeze had taken the advice Batman gave him in Arkham City to heart. He was staying away from crime and focusing on curing Nora. Annoyed, Crane had the militia attack Freeze's ship, the Nora, taking Nora's cryopod and damaging the reactor for her cure. Scarecrow promised Victor that Nora would be returned in exchange for Batman. Batman attacked Scarecrow's Chinatown safe house, hoping to find him. Instead, all he found was militia troops guarding Ivy, who was locked inside the gas chamber, strapped to a chair, with a guard discouraging escape attempts. After Batman took out the guards, the one next to Ivy radios Scarecrow, who appears on the screen in the back of the gas chamber. Crane explains that he is sorry to disappoint Batman with not being able to be there in person, but he will instead give a demonstration of what was to come later that night. He gassed the room, infecting the guard, who was promptly knocked out by Ivy. The toxin had no effect on her, since she had analysed the toxin and made an antidote for it from plant spores. Ivy proceeded to explain Scarecrow's plan, while he sent militia drones to attack her and Batman. The attempt failed. With the militia's help, Scarecrow seized control of Ace Chemicals, where he set out to the central mixing chamber to mass-produce the fear toxin to create a bomb powerful enough to take out the entire eastern seaboard. The Arkham Knight was to give one final warning of when the explosion would go off, but Crane didn't care if there were still any troops around. Infecting others with his fear toxin was all that mattered to him. When Batman and the GCPD arrived on site, the Knight destroyed the bridge to the facility with his attack chopper. Though the Arkham Knight wanted to kill Batman on site, Scarecrow overrode his vehicle's systems, stated that if he killed Batman, he'd have nothing left to fear, and ordered him to keep Batman away from Ace Chemicals until his work was complete. After Batman evacuated the two surviving Ace Chemicals workers from the site, he confronted Scarecrow in the central mixing chamber. Maintaining his composure, Crane knelt down with both of his hands behind his head and showed no resistance. However, Batman smashed his head against the control panel and demanded to know how the fear toxin could be stopped. Confident, Crane explained that it's impossible to stop, and that the building would soon explode and release his fear toxin. Scarecrow then warned the Dark Knight to release him, claiming that Barbara Gordon would be killed if he didn't comply. Batman distracted himself to the clock tower, at which point Oracle was abducted. Scarecrow escaped and locked Batman in. Departing, he taunted Batman by telling him that nothing hurts more than the death of someone closest to you. Scarecrow left Batman to perish in the explosion that would consume Ace Chemicals, departing in a militia helicopter to watch his fear toxin cover Gotham. However, Batman managed to put enough neutralizing agents in the mix to reduce the blast radius to just the area around the factory before the building collapsed. Having seen that his main plan had failed, Scarecrow realized that Batman must have escaped his trap and would resume hunting for him. Crane realized that he would have to resort to the more time-consuming Plan B. After Ace Chemicals, Crane returned to the militia's HQ, where he would keep tabs on Batman's progress with fighting Gotham's Most Wanted. Scarecrow continued taunting Batman via the monitors, insisting that everything that happened to Batman's allies was the Dark Knight's own fault, and that his efforts over the years were pointless. At one point, he wondered if Batman had thought he was dead before this Halloween night, due to his near-death experience back at the asylum. Noting that Batman used fear to control thugs, Scarecrow declared that he has usurped the throne the Dark Knight ruled from. Scarecrow saw himself as the Sovereign now. Under the threat of death from the Arkham Knight, Scarecrow was forbidden from harming Barbara Gordon or injecting his fear toxin into her. Unknown to him, the Knight was actually an old friend of Barbara's that still had a soft spot for her despite his hatred of Batman, Jason Todd. Scarecrow had the militia harpoon Stag's airships and pull them back to Founders Island, needing the Cloudburst for his Plan B. He had the Knight lock the unsuspecting Stag in an experimentation cell as punishment for double-crossing him. Crane then went to prep the Cloudburst, ordering the militia to begin supplying power to it as he knew Batman would catch wind of this. At the time, Batman had found the holding cells containing the victims of Crane's experiments and was interrogating Stag about his whereabouts. When Stag began talking about the Cloudburst, Crane gassed him remotely to keep Stag silent. Scarecrow soon found no Nimbus cells were being sent to charge the Cloudburst, meaning Batman had taken out his guards. He awaited the Dark Knight's entrance. Batman found him, but Crane was able to gas him with fear toxin. Unbeknownst to Scarecrow, he was only able to do this because Batman was seeing hallucinations of the Joker, and had picked one disguised as him by accident. Batman writhed in agony on the ground, trying to fight off the effects of Crane's fear toxin. Crane paced around, taunting Batman, explaining that he would soon remove the Dark Knight's mask and show the world that he was nothing more than a man forced to face his fears. Once this happened, the people of Gotham would no longer have a savior to give them hope, as there would be no more Batman. Taking Scarecrow by surprise, Batman said he has already disappeared. Tossed aside, an astonished Crane decided to watch this new reaction in Batman play out. What Scarecrow didn't know was that the conscience of the Joker had surfaced in the Dark Knight and was ready to take his body for a test drive. The possessed Batman pummeled the militia soldiers that came to back up Scarecrow within an inch of their lives as the Mad Doctor watched. As the effects faded, Batman regained control of his body, and Crane remarked something about him seemed different. He was showing fear. When warned by Batman that there was nowhere to run, Crane backed up to the wall and laughed. Who said anything about running? Holding onto the ladder, Scarecrow and the Cloudburst were pulled away from the airship by a helicopter. When Batman attempted to follow him, Scarecrow had the Knight run interference by launching rockets at him. Once safely away from Batman back at the militia HQ, Scarecrow broadcasted a message to all of Gotham, demanding Batman's attention. As part of his twisted mind games, Scarecrow has placed Barbara in his gassing chamber back in Chinatown. Batman arrived, Scarecrow doused him with fear toxin. Barbara was kept unaffected due to being in the gassing chamber. In Batman's mind, Barbara had been gassed and was freaking out at the sight of him. Seeing this, Scarecrow decided to take advantage of the Dark Knight's fear and instructed Barbara to pick up a gun and deny him. To Batman, Barbara futilely shot at the glass, ultimately committing suicide via gunshot to keep herself from being attacked by the monster she saw in Batman's place. Little did Crane know, this punishment almost made Batman consider just letting the Joker's influence take over to rid himself of his pain. Once Batman left, Scarecrow waited until the gas in the room faded before sending the militia to collect Barbara from the gassing chamber. Crane kept the fact that Barbara was still alive a secret, hoping to push the Dark Knight further and further, until his facade broke and everyone saw the fraud he truly was. He contacted Batman through the monitors again, asking what it was like to see the hallucination react to seeing his true self, whatever kind of monster the fear gas would make Batman look like. He defended this action, calling it necessary, not cruelty. As Batman never responded to him, Scarecrow began wondering aloud if the Dark Knight's mask helped push down any actual emotion that he should be feeling. Unknown to Scarecrow, Batman had the Batwing circling the 3 islands of main Gotham to find the Cloudburst, which gave off a unique energy signature. At the time, more Nimbus cells were being loaded onto the device, leaving it vulnerable to being destroyed. As 2 enormous plants had erupted out of the ground on Miagani Island, Scarecrow realized an unlikely alliance had been struck between Batman and Ivy. The two were working together to revive plants with pollen, able to neutralize the effects of this new strain of fear toxin. Crane broadcast to Gotham again, telling Batman it was a wasted effort. Ivy would also be paying a steep price for defying him. Scarecrow sent the malicious drones to kill the plants, hoping to find the one Ivy was hiding in. With her dead, nothing would be able to hinder his efforts to unleash terror upon Gotham. However, they were destroyed by the combined efforts of Ivy manipulating the roots and the Batmobile's weapons. Seeing no other way to accomplish his plans, Scarecrow finished powering the Cloudburst and had it attached to the Knight's personal tank, sending him to Bleak Island to activate Plan B. Seen from all around Gotham, a large blast of fear toxin was launched from the machine, high into the sky. It exploded, releasing an electrified fear cloud that swallowed Miagani, Bleak, and Founders Islands. The rest of Gotham was left untouched by the release of the fear cloud, allowing those still unaffected to see the horror. Within the confines of the infected area, all the rioters had begun attacking each other in terror. Each was seeing whatever it was they feared most in place of their fellow criminals. Gotham was left glowing orange from the fear cloud, which was sustained by the Cloudburst. As a side effect of using the Cloudburst, the Batmobile was left inoperable as it did not run on a Nimbus cell. Once the blast had subsided, Scarecrow broadcasted to Gotham again, stating that it had been transformed into his city of fear. Having been exposed to his toxins, the inhabitants of Gotham have now seen Batman wasn't unstoppable and had finally failed them. The Cloudburst also had the effects of amplifying the toxin to the point where it was leeching the life from the plant life in Gotham. To keep the plants from dying, Ivy connected herself to them, feeding them her own life energy to keep them alive. Aware of this, Scarecrow broadcasted again, telling Batman that while his toxin attacks the human mind, it's killing Ivy. Batman managed to obtain a Nimbus cell from Stag's airships to repower the Batmobile. Batman braved the fear toxin cloud, refitting the Batmobile with the cell, and went to help release the third plant to clear the toxin. Once the plant was out, Batman headed off to destroy the Cloudburst. When Bleak Island's bridges were raised remotely, Scarecrow ordered the Knight to retreat. However, the Knight ignored him, deciding to kill Batman. Batman took out the drones escorting the Knight's tank one by one. Each time, Scarecrow ordered the Knight to make a strategic retreat. However, much to his anger, Scarecrow was ignored. He even pointed out that the Cloudburst was his property, not bait. Unfortunately, the Dark Knight scanned the tank, learning of the cooling systems that kept the Cloudburst from exploding. He attacked them in the main body of the tank, leaving the Knight without any means of escape. Scarecrow continued to watch these events, seeing Batman drag the Knight out of his tank and onto a rooftop. Scarecrow told the waiting Deathstroke that he had his chance to go after Batman, letting him use the majority of the militia however he pleased. Without the cloudburst to maintain it, the fear toxin cloud was cleared away by Ivy. However, the strain of doing so cost Ivy her life. Comforted by Batman, she dissolved into dust and blew away in the wind. Rogues were left enraged that Scarecrow had subjected them to such horrors. Crane was left to rethink his plans, deciding to again focus on unmasking and breaking Batman. He broadcast to Gotham, explaining the militia now obeys him, and that while his fear toxin was cleared away, he had succeeded in breaking the faith Gotham had placed in Batman. The Dark Knight was not as omnipotent as everyone has thought he was. Adding on to this was the long time the city would need to recover from the attack. Crane soon captures Gordon, who had tracked him down to rescue Barbara. The deranged Master of Fear offered the overprotective father a deal. He would release Barbara in exchange for bringing Batman to him. Though disappointed with the Arkham Knight, Crane allows him to use Gordon as bait to lure Batman to his secret HQ. The agreement struck between them, Gordon led Batman to an elevator leading them to the roof on a building under construction. Meeting together, Crane reveals Oracle is alive and the pact he made with Gordon, ordering him to carry out his end of the deal by threatening to push Barbara off the building. Gordon intentionally shot Batman in the chest, where he knew that Batman's armor was the strongest, and Batman fell off the building. But Scarecrow, who didn't want Batman dead, pushed Oracle off the building where Batman caught her mid-air. Though Barbara was safe, Crane made his leave with the militia and Gordon as his hostage by helicopter. He sent drones to check and see if Batman lived. Not only was the Dark Knight still alive, he had a second Batmobile, which reduced the drones to scrap metal. After Batman returned Barbara to the GCPD lockup, Scarecrow sent drones to assault the GCPD while Crane used Gordon to access Panetta Studios. He likely learned about the victims of Joker's blood and wanted to see if he could use them in his research. Instead, he found their corpses and both Robin and Harley locked up in cells. Though Robin attempted to attack him, once released from his cell, the militia succeeded in subduing him and breaking his bowstaff. Scarecrow then had his mark painted on the cell as a calling card to Batman, hoping that with two hostages, he had twice the control over Batman's fears. However, he also refused to release Harley, who held no further purpose in his plans. Batman later returns and sees the scene, being informed by Harley about what happened and of where the next message from Scarecrow would come from. Appearing on a monitor at a storage depot in Kingston, Crane informed Batman that if he wanted to save Robin and Gordon, he had to surrender himself to him. Batman accepted, turned himself over to Scarecrow, and abandoned his utility belt. Batman then entered a van and was driven to Arkham Island, where Scarecrow was waiting for him. After he arrived at Arkham Mansion at the abandoned Arkham Asylum, Batman found Gordon and Robin being held captive by Scarecrow. Scarecrow revealed he was broadcasting live across the city, seeking to make Gordon unmask Batman so that Gotham could see their beloved hero's face as he succumbed to the fear toxin. Initially, Gordon protested, so Scarecrow shot Robin in the chest. Robin lived due to his suit's armor, but Scarecrow threatened to shoot him in the head if Gordon didn't cooperate. Batman told Gordon it was the only way, and the Commissioner reluctantly unmasked him. Upon Batman's unmasking, the television showing the broadcast and its reaction were full of shock as the Dark Knight was revealed to be Bruce Wayne. Scarecrow was surprised to see that his old foe was a supposed billionaire playboy. He then explained he wouldn't kill Bruce, but instead set him free to watch as Gotham fall apart at the shock of learning Batman's true identity, and to watch thugs attack his allies to get revenge for all that Batman has done to them. Scarecrow then proceeded to inject Bruce with his fear toxin, hoping to expose him as a fraud. He then watched as Batman began writhing in agony as the toxin began taking hold on his mind. Moments later, he gloated that soon Bruce's life would be over. To his shock, Crane heard Batman say it was a good thing. Baffled, Scarecrow asked if Batman could understand it's over. Batman told him to get ready for the encore, laughing madly. Wondering why aren't you scared, Crane injected Batman with another dose of fear toxin. Unbeknownst to Scarecrow, he was actually speaking to the Joker, who had managed to gain control of Batman's body. However, this extra dose of the toxin was just what Batman needed to show Joker his own fear of being forgotten, and eradicate his presence in his mind. To Scarecrow's shock, Batman flatly told him he wasn't scared. Annoyed, Crane gave him another dose of the fear toxin. However, Batman continued to fight off the effects. Declaring that life is meaningless without fear, Scarecrow pulled his gun, pointing it at Batman's head. However, it was shot out of his hand by the Red Hood, who sided with Batman once more. Scarecrow readied another injection, hoping to kill Batman with a stabbing to the head. However, Red Hood's next shot freed Batman's arms. Grabbed by the Dark Knight, Scarecrow was given a dose of his own medicine, despite his protests. Feeling the effects of the toxin, Scarecrow tried fighting off the visions it gave him. However, upon hearing Batman ask if he was scared, Crane let go of all restraint, yelling in fear. He saw Batman as a demonic bat figure, commanding a swarm of bats. Trying to flee, Crane was knocked out by Gordon. Crane was taken to the GCPD lockup in the Batwing. Reduced to a mumbling, cowardly former shell of himself, Crane was locked in the maximum security cell along with the rest of the other supercriminals. Crane spent the entire night sitting cross-legged, holding his head in fear, and scanning the cell. Seeing that the lights were on but nobody was home, none of the other supercriminals made an effort to talk to Scarecrow.